She punched a billionaire on live TV. Then the test strip turned blood red. That was the headline Lagos would gorge on tomorrow. But tonight began in a room so small even hope had to fold itself twice to fit. Zuri Okafor woke to the fragile gray leaking through frayed curtains and the rattle of her mother Adeze's cough, a dry, stubborn metronome that timed out the price of medicine they couldn't afford. 2 onions on a dented tin counter, a handful of rice if she lied to hunger, rent circled in red on a calendar she'd scavenged from a shop's trash. The landlord had banged the door 2 days ago with the authority of a storm. His patience, like their rice, had run thin. Then the phone buzzed. A last-minute agency call. VIP shift at the Elohim Trust Gala, Henry Foundation Hall. 1 night's pay worth a week's air. Be careful, Adeze rasped, palm warm and too hot on Zuri's brow as if fever could spread by love. Those places weren't built for us. I'll bring something home, Zuri promised, casting the words like a rope over a cliff. She ironed her black and white uniform by candlelight, steam lifting from a shirt she'd scrubbed in cold water, and stepped into the morning like a soldier into weather. The service basement smelled of disinfectant and nervous sweat. Fluorescent tubes hummed with the energy of other people's money. Maureen, the planner, with a clipboard she wielded like a judge's gavel, stalked the line of temps. Your wallpaper, she snapped. Smile, serve, and disappear. Zuri, VIP drinks, no mistakes. The name on the program prickled Zuri's skin. Kelechi Dairo, billionaire who funded public school libraries and the scholarship she'd once filled out and slid under a mattress after her father's death turned school into fantasy. Upstairs, the hall was a chandeliered hallucination. Lilies, orchids, and roses perfuming marble so polished it could swallow a fall. Tablecloth white enough to make clouds jealous. Media walls repeating logos until the air itself seemed sponsored. Tanya Bello, Kelechi's fiancée, all silver sequins and angles learned from cameras, rehearsed poses under work lights, flicking her wrist so the diamond could find every lens, complaining the key light washed her out, and insisting on a 3/4 shot to flatter her profile. Charity, Zuri thought, had become a mirror. When Kelechi arrived, the room's noise leaned toward him without being asked. No entourage, no trumpet, a suit that whispered craftsmanship instead of wealth. He thanked the sound tech by name, asked the clinic nurse about shortages, listened in a way that made other people's spines uncoil. Beside him moved Kasim, the chief of security with a reader's eyes, cataloging exits, pauses, faces. The contrast struck like thunder over Third Mainland. One person needed to be seen. The other saw. Zuri kept moving, polishing glasses already spotless, folding napkins into swans whose necks arched like small prayers, trying to fit herself into invisibility's safe outline. Survival had always been a choreography. Keep your head low, lips thinner than a secret, count steps, count breaths, count coins. Do not speak first. Yet the room's extravagance made her hunger loud, and each glittering centerpiece measured itself against an evening's medicine. She thought of Adeze's cough, of the landlord's fist on cheap wood, of the calendar's red ring, and the way shame wore man's voice like a suit. She told herself the rules. Be small, be silent, be seamless. Because the agency would not forgive drama, and she could not afford principle. Still, as she traced the route from VIP bar to head table, she felt something she did not have time for, the shiver of a future bending. The good version looked simple. She'd float through the gala like a shadow, keep trays level, say yes sir and right away ma'am, collect her envelope, buy antibiotics, buy rice, sleep inside a night that didn't gnaw. The bad version had no shape, only a pressure, as if the hall's lights were watching back. She breathed, tasting metal and perfume, and anchored herself to a promise. Work, vanish, go home. She didn't know yet that somewhere behind the ice machine a man in a cap was already fingering a brown envelope, that a tiny blue dot on a wine crate would soon blink like a hazard light only she would see, that Lagos would learn her name because she refused to let a glass touch a good man's mouth. For now, there was only the hum of wealth, the snap of orders, the sting of polish on her hands, and the quiet, reckless beat of a heart preparing to choose.
Backstage, service thundered like weather trapped in concrete, steam sighing from chafers, knives ticking against boards, waiters polishing the same rims until their fingerprints felt erased, while Zuri folded napkins into swans because the assignment was small and safe, and small and safe was how poor people survived expensive nights. But safety wobbled when she saw the sommelier, Sei, steady hands, label obsessed, the priest of glass and grape, freeze mid-unboxing as a man in a low baseball cap slid from behind the ice machine like a shadow that had learned to walk, pressed him against stacked crates, and hissed a conversation made of teeth and corners. The kind of talk you only hear with your eyes. A brown envelope palmed fast, the flash of banded cash like a flare, and a jab from the capman's finger toward one crate in the back row. The label there had a tiny blue dot in its corner, no bigger than a freckle, small enough to be ignored by anyone who didn't spend their life noticing things the powerful forgot. Sei swallowed, pulled one bottle from the blue dot grate with a reverence that looked like terror in church clothes, set it aside, then panicked at his own decision, sliding it under linen, then out again, hands shaking just enough to rattle Zuri's ribs. Before she could move, Emeka Onanuju, CFO grin polished to a showroom shine, arrived with the planner Maureen and the sequin satellite named Tanya, his voice pitched low, urgent, a hiss dressed as courtesy. The special toast happens right after the chairman's speech, no delays, and the exact bottle must be in place. His glance flicked so briefly toward the bar that you could miss it if you believed in coincidence. Zuri didn't. She cut sideways to the floor captain, Patrick, a man whose clipboard gave him the temper of a small god. "Sir, about the wine. Sei's off," she said, choosing helpful over hysterical. Patrick sneered without bothering to use words. "Are you the sommelier now or a therapist? Fold napkins." Shame rose hot to her ears, but the blue dot pulsed in her head like a hazard light behind her eyelids. Rules said, stay invisible. Rent said, keep the shift. Conscience said, move. She spotted Dio, a kind-eyed server doing rounds near the VIP bar, and leaned in, voice low and urgent. "My mom just texted. Fever's up. Can you cover my floor for 10? I'll do the VIP bar, less walking." The lie tasted like duty. Dio nodded without paperwork or questions. The poor recognize emergency like weather. Zuri slid behind the bar, polishing glasses already spotless, pretending to be the calmest part of the room so she could sit right beside its beating heart. From here, she saw Sei more clearly, the careful ritual of the corkscrew, the practiced twist that now fought him like a lock with the wrong key. He set one pristine glass on a folded napkin, and with a micro-fold in one corner, a crease so small it looked like a mistake to anyone who hadn't watched him make it, he marked it. Signals speak softly when they're meant for one pair of eyes. Emeka drifted past like perfume, smiling at Maureen, smiling at no one, smiling at the idea of smiling. Near the podium, Tanya rehearsed an expression halfway between sympathy and brand management. Beyond them, Kasim, Kelechi's head of security, tracked the room with that patient predator calm, mapping exits, bottlenecks, threats, the choreography of a crowd that wanted to be seen more than safe. Zuri's palms went cold. The mechanism revealed itself the way rain reveals a leak, blue dot bottle, single marked glass, timing yoked to speeches, then a camera surge to herd bodies, create a wall that would separate Kasim from Kelechi for the one moment that mattered. She tried Patrick again. "Sir, just 30 seconds to verify that crate," and earned a snort that felt like a door hitting her nose. Around them the gala gathered speed. Media teams tested strobes. A string quartet tuned sorrow into silk. Chefs plated bite-sized luxuries whose names sounded like passwords. Senators arrived with laughter that wanted to be overheard. Say lifted the blue dot bottle at last, face drained, and poured the deep red into the single marked glass. No twins, no mix-ups, destiny decanted by a hand that had expected to bless. He placed it on a small silver tray and stared at it as if it could stare back. Maureen, moving with the confidence of a woman whose headset sounded like God, hovered just close enough to intercept without looking like she planned to. Emeka showed his teeth. Tanya checked her reflection in the back of a spoon like a threat. And Zuri, who had come to be wallpaper, felt the wall shift under her feet. She was not a cop, or a guard, or a donor. She was a girl who noticed things and whose notice had never mattered until it suddenly did. She could shout and get fired. She could stay silent and watch a man die. She could smash the glass and end more than a shift. In her pocket, her phone was a stone, silent, heavy, useless. In her chest, her heart tapped out a choice she didn't want to own. The MC's voice boomed, the lights dipped, and time narrowed to the width of a crystal rim.
House lights softened to gold, and the hall inhaled as the MC's baritone rolled across the lilies. Tanya drifted to the podium first, perfect smile lacquered on, delivering a speech that touched legacy like a brand tagline, and skimmed past children as if charity were a backdrop for her angles. And when the applause arrived, polite, tepid, photogenic, she stepped aside with a glance that measured cameras, not people. Then Kelechi took the mic with no teleprompter, and the room changed temperature, his voice steady and human, as he named a teacher from Ajegunle, a clinic nurse from Makoko, a boy who wanted to be an engineer if only his school had more than 3 textbooks, and he announced a rural schools fund that didn't sparkle but sounded like roofs and desks and light bulbs. And the clapping that followed wasn't a performance, it was relief, respect, a thing with roots. Zuri watched from the VIP bar's edge where she had slipped herself, polishing already spotless crystal so she could stand next to the fuse box of the night, and saw the code tighten like wire. Maureen's chin flick, Emeka's eyelids lowering as if receiving a transmission, Seyi lifting a small silver tray carrying one glass on one folded napkin, its corner creased in that tiny mark that only meant something if you knew it did. Zuri's breath went thin, because everything she'd been taught about staying invisible collided with everything she'd learned from being poor. Notice or be eaten. And the plan revealed itself with cruel elegance. A single contaminated bottle, flagged with a blue dot, poured into a single marked glass, delivered at a single engineered moment when a wall of photographers would surge, their bodies and flash pops forming a perfect screen between Kelechi and Kasim, so that protocol lost line of sight for the 2 seconds it takes a man to raise a toast. The MC's cue hit like a snare drum. And now, our chairman, please lead us in a special toast. And right on time, the camera pack rushed the stage, a choreography of elbows and light. Maureen intercepted Seyi with a smile that looked like help and felt like gravity, pivoted the tray into a path that placed it in Kelechi's reach the instant he stepped down, and Emeka's mouth smiled while his eyes stayed cold, the way predators smile when the distance closes. Zuri did the math. Lungs to larynx to shout, 3 seconds to be understood, a guard to the stage, 4 seconds if he believed her, a sip to swallow, 1 second, maybe less. Every solution that kept her employable ended with a body on the floor, and the memory of Adeise's cough tried to pull her back into safety, into silence, into the smallness that kept the lights on. But another memory shoved forward, the landlord's fist on plywood, the red ring on the calendar, the way shame uses your name like a leash, and anger braided to love into something stronger than fear. Across the room, Tanya raised her own flute for the cameras, eyes pinned not to the crowd, but to the rim of Kelechi's glass, the way a trap watches its bait. And Seyi's hands shook at his sides like a man who already hated himself for what happened next. And Qasim tried to ghost through the photographers, but their bodies knit like chainmail. And Patrick, the floor captain, barked about canapé refills, as if hors d'oeuvres could be louder than fate. Zuri's heart became a metronome, counting down a life. She thought of all the rules that had kept her alive. Don't be first, don't be loud, don't be seen. And understood at last that those rules had been written by people who planned nights like this, that invisibility was a fence, not a shield. Kelechi reached for the glass. The diamond on Tanya's hand threw a star onto his sleeve. The napkin's tiny fold winked like a loaded die. Somewhere deep in Zuri's wrists, in muscles trained by buckets and bus rides, and trays held level through crowds, a decision sparked without asking permission from fear. She set the polishing cloth down, as if laying a fuse, planted one foot, and shot from behind a bar, a black and white streak cutting the seam between wealth and consequence, past a startled usher's grab, past a bouquet's perfume, past the embarrassed logic that said, "This isn't your place." Head low, shoulders tight, hands open to catch, to knock, to break, whatever the next breath demanded. And the hall, for a sliver of time, thin as crystal, didn't yet know it was watching history stand up.
She hit him clean. No wind-up, no warning. Just a compact left born from carrying buckets and balancing trays through tight buses, her knuckles cracking against Kelechi's jaw with the shocking, hollow music of crystal on stone. And the world seemed to hold its breath as his head snapped. The glass arced from his hand like a thrown comet, and then it shattered across the marble in a starburst that silenced even the cameras. Red spread fast, a brutal ink blot that smelled expensive and wrong, and for a heartbeat the gala was a freeze frame. Tanya mid-gasp with a hand pressed to the diamond she wore like a title. Emeka's smile peeled back into something skeletal, Maureen's headset hanging open as if she'd suddenly forgotten how to speak, Saya recoiling as though the spill could climb his shoes, Qasim lunging but half a step too late, and Zuri, the girl who was supposed to be wallpaper, pinned beneath two guards whose training turned her bones into levers, cheek grinding into cold marble while the crowd's mind tried to reboot from assault to why. Then the sound returned all at once. Shouts, a feedback squeal, someone sobbing, someone swearing, and Tanya found a microphone quick as a predator finds a vein, her voice vibrating with practiced horror as she pointed at Zuri. "She's a stalker, obsessed, arrest her before she hurts someone else." Emeka chimed in with corporate righteousness, "This is an attack on the chairman," while Patrick barked about order to feel important. And under the tangle of accusation, Zuri forced air through a throat tight with fear and yelled the only words that mattered. "Test the spill, blue dot bottle, folded napkin corner, meant for him alone." The phrase hit Qasim's attention like a key turning. He and Kelechi exchanged a soldier's nod, decision passing between them at a speed the womb couldn't see, and Qasim's voice cut the chaos with a blade's certainty. "Seal the bar. No one touches anything. Frank, contaminant strip, now." A venue supervisor sprinted. Cameras clustered like hungry moths. Tanya hissed at a photographer to get this, as if framing could rewrite chemistry. The guards loosened their weight at Kelechi's raised palm. Jaw bruising, eyes clear, he said, "Don't hurt her." And the sentence bled shock out of the security men's hands. Frank knelt among glittering shards, swabbed the crimson smear, swabbed the neck of a half-empty bottle pulled from behind the bar that wore to Zuri's vindicated terror a tiny blue dot in its label corner, then snapped both swabs into a white cassette like he was loading truth into a trap, and stared, as did everyone, at paper that pretended to be ordinary until the world asked it a lethal question. 5 seconds were an era. Then one line surfaced, then another, and the pad bloomed an ugly, undeniable color that stole breath from lungs in a slow, rippling hush. Sai cracked first, a sound like a dam breaking in a throat, his hands over his face, voice tumbling. "He paid me, the man in the cap, just one glass for the chairman," and his fingers shaking as if the truth weighed kilos found Emeka.
Emeka laughed, a brittle, too sharp noise that died fast, and for a blink his eyes flinched to Tanya, and it was enough for Kasim, who moved the way doors close when storms arrive. Lock every exit, diplomatic guests or not, this is a crime scene. Maureen tried to protest with protocol and guest lists and words like incident, but Kalichi, jaw set over gratitude and rage tightened tight, spoke calmly into a microphone that didn't need to sell anything. No one leaves until the police arrive. Your safety is our priority. The room obeyed the tone even if some mouths kept moving. Kasim sent runners for CCTV pulls. Tex fetched a laptop. The first clip played right there on a linen-draped side table like sacrilege. The Catman slipping cyan envelope, the jab at the blue dot crate, a freeze-frame zoom catching a sharp jawline, and the kind of watch that announces its owner before he does, the same gleam hugging Emeka's wrist. A second clip showed Maureen's elegant interception of the tray at the exact second the photographers swarmed, rerouting destiny with a smile, and the headset around her neck suddenly looked like a noose. Tanya, face wet, lashes immaculate, snatched a handheld and poured out a story about obsession and setups and jealous staffers craving fame, but the rapid test on the table answered with color, not narrative, and chemistry does not accept PR. Zuri, shaking under the guard's hovering hands, met Kalichi's gaze for a fraction of a second and saw something impossible lodging there, belief, and the weight of that almost knocked her back to the floor. Dio edged close enough to whisper, "I saw you. God bless you." And in the corner, Sai folded, whispering apologies to a floor that couldn't forgive, while Emeka pulled out his phone with the casual drift of a man calling legal and tried to ooze towards a side exit until Kasim's palm anchored on his shoulder like a verdict. The room had changed shape, the story had broken in half, and the girl who punched a billionaire was no longer a problem to be removed, but the reason he was still standing.
The investigation unspooled in public like a thread yanked from an evening gown, exposing seams everyone had pretended were silk. Kasim moved first, not with shouting, but with sequence. Evidence, chain of custody, witnesses, while the hall's perfume thinned into the sterile bite of procedure as venue staff fetched a laptop, techs lugged in a mobile kit, and security taped a crooked yellow perimeter around the bar where the wine had bled. The first CCTV clip, grainy, indifferent, played on a linen-draped side cable and turned gossip into geometry. The Catman slipping from behind the ice machine, Sei's back stiff as a board, the brown envelope exchanged with the fast economy of criminals, a jab toward the crate that wore, tucked into the corner of its label, that treacherous blue dot. "Pause," Kasim said, and Frank froze the frame while a tech zoomed until pixels turned into blocks, and the watch on the Catman's wrist glinted a signature oval. Same make, same metal, same habit of catching light as the one hugging Emeka's cuff. A murmur rippled, the kind that sounds like denial trying to get dressed in time. Clip 2 rolled and caught Maureen at the precise hinge of chaos, her smile an instrument as she intercepted Sei's silver tray exactly when the photographer surged, pivoting the single marked glass along a path that delivered it not to a server destined for the head table, but straight toward Kalechi's hand, choreography wearing coincidence as a mask. Maureen's shoulders sagged as if the footage tugged strings tied to her bones, the headset at her throat suddenly a collar. Tanya lunged for a handheld mic with actor's instinct, tears bright enough to sell, voice breaking just so. "This is a setup. She's an obsessive. She staged a spill to look heroic." But the rapid test strip on the table, still screaming crimson, didn't speak PR, and chemistry doesn't negotiate. Kasim requested Sei's phone and got it without a lawyer's theater. Remorse does not require counsel, and a few swipes later revealed 2 fat deposits from a consultancy no one in legitimate procurement had heard of. Kasim's brows twitched. The vendor's alias had brushed his desk weeks ago when a quiet audit flagged anomalies in Emeka's pipeline. "Call logs," he said, and another tech mapped a web of messages, Emeka to Maureen, Maureen to Sei, Tanya to Maureen, in the hour before the toast, the timestamps lining up like soldiers at inspection. A young waiter, Dio, hands trembling, heart brave, stepped into the circle of light and whispered, "I heard Maureen tell Tanya our future starts tonight." And you could feel the room tilt as if moral gravity had just been recalibrated. Outside, sirens braided with the city's traffic, and then uniforms entered, police cool as tile, a mobile lab snapping cases open, evidence bags yawning like little clear mouths. They took the blue dot bottle, the folded napkin with its subtle corner crease, shard samples from the spill, swabs from bar mats, prints from stems and silver. Tanya claimed she'd been in the powder room with her makeup artist, but a side-angle camera showed her sliding into the service corridor for 30 seconds just before the tray moved, and a paparazzi shot already bouncing around group chats caught her raising a flute to the cameras, palm outward in a perfect glam gesture. When magnified, a faint streak of blue smudged across her lifeline, the glue's shy signature. Say broke open at last, words tumbling like marbles across tile. Gambling debt, men who make you disappear by letting other men find you. Threats gummed to kindness. A week-old approach by the Cap man, the instruction chilling in its precision. Keep one bottle separate, pour only one glass for the chairman, confirm the target with a tiny fold in the napkin. She came to the bar and said, "Make it smooth, no scent." A lab tech returned with a preliminary sheet that needed no poetry. Fast-acting, cardiotoxic compound, odorless, colorless, present in the remnants from the blue dot bottle and the glass shards, absent in all other samples. Emeka dialed his phone and began to drift toward a side exit wearing the bland expression of a man calling legal to contain an incident, but Kasim's hand arrived on his shoulder like a decision, and Emeka's forward motion evaporated. Maureen folded into a chair, the fight gone from her posture, and when two officers approached, she didn't resist, only nodded as if confession had been catching up to her step by step. The lead detective read rights with the crisp dignity of someone who knows cameras are rolling, and then looked up to Kelechi to confirm the hold on the hall. "Everyone stays," Kelechi said gently into a microphone, not performing calm so much as manufacturing it. The guests, rattled but safe inside his certainty, obeyed, and Zuri, still shaking, cheek scraped, hands stinging, the taste of adrenaline bitter as coin, stood a step behind Kasim and watched something rare, a city that usually applauds power, choosing in real time to listen to the girl who refused to stay invisible.
At the private clinic, fluorescent lights washed everything the same indifferent color. Nurses in soft shoes, a wall clock chewing seconds. Kelechi on an exam table with an ice pack against a jaw blooming purple like a storm at dusk, while Zuri sat in a plastic chair just outside, the adrenaline that had carried her through marble and cameras now curdling into a heavy, metallic dread. She stared at the floor till the scuffs made constellations, counting the new debts her bravery might have bought. A blacklisted file at the agency, a landlord newly brave, Edese's pills running out like sand. Then Kasim lowered himself into the neighboring chair, elbows on knees, voice pitched for one listener. "You're not finished," he said, a simple sentence that felt like a bridge over fire. "You're just beginning." And Zuri swallowed a knot so big it could have been all the words she hadn't been allowed to speak for years. The doctor emerged with the wearied cheer of men who've seen worse. No fracture, tenderness for a week, ice and rest. And Kelechi, already on his feet, touched the bruise as if to confirm the night's reality, then nodded toward a waiting car. They didn't go home, but to the Foundation's glass-walled conference room, where Lagos glittered in a million patient lights. Kasim closed the door and stood guard outside, and in the hush that followed, Zuri felt the old rules trying to pull her back into apology. Don't take up space, don't explain the obvious, don't expect kindness. But Kelechi set the ice pack on the table and said, "Tell me everything from your eyes." And something unclenched. She told it all. The Capman's body language, the envelope flash, the blue dot hiding on the crate corner, Say's wobbling courage, Emeka's timed obsession with the toast, Maureen's interception rehearsed like dance steps, the folded napkin signal, the photographer's human wall, her failed warning to Patrick, the arithmetic of seconds that made shouting a suicide note and a punch the only certain choice. "I'm sorry I hit you," she finished, looking at her hands so he wouldn't see the shame in her eyes. There wasn't time." Kasim breathed out a sound that wasn't quite a laugh, wasn't quite pain. "You chose the sure way," he said. Not accusing, just naming a fact as if it were a virtue, then slid a slim folder across the table. Hospital paperwork, a letter on Foundation letterhead, 2 authorizations stamped and signed.
Zuri's shoulders rose defensively, but he gently pushed the folder nearer. "Your mother's medical bills are covered," he said, the words unadorned, "and your rent is handled for the next year. Not charity, a thank you that doesn't depend on the news cycle." She flinched anyway, reflex honed by a life that punished gifts, whispering no before yes could reach her tongue. "Please," he added softer, "let me breathe a bit easier knowing you too will." The room thinned around her. She nodded because her throat wouldn't cooperate with gratitude. Outside, detectives interviewed senior staff. One stepped in to confirm what Kelechi had already hinted. He'd recently rewritten sections of his will and tightened corporate share controls to stop any one executive from moving money through hidden channels. He'd quietly frozen a vendor pipeline Amika championed after an internal auditor flagged padded contracts and circular invoices. Motive, like a photo in a darkroom tray, emerged fully. Kill the stabilizer, reset the old rules, inherit the levers. When the door shut again, Kelechi studied Zuri. "You see things, and you care enough to act. I can't teach either." He outlined something that was not a favor, but a frame. A position as community liaison for the scholarship program, pay that didn't ask a person to choose between food and transport, mentorship that didn't wear condescension like cologne. "Help us find the students who fall through forms. Be the eyes for kids like you." Zuri laughed once, a fragile, ridiculous sound in such a serious room, then covered her mouth, then let the laugh become tears that made no apology. She thought of Adese's cough, of Deo's quick yes, of Say's confession, of the blue dot that had guided her like a tiny star, and whispered, "I'll work." Kasim cracked the door, face easing when he saw the acceptance written on Zuri's. "Good," he said, dry humor peeking out. "Also, I'm stealing your left hook for training." And for the first time since the glass exploded, Zuri's smile didn't feel like a borrowed thing.
The board moved first, a wall of sober suits closing ranks around Kelechi with a unanimity that said both relief and resolve. And the audit he'd quietly sparked before the gala bloomed into a map of rot no one could ignore. Shell vendors stacked like nesting dolls, invoices that looped in circles until numbers got dizzy. Contracts Emeka had shepherded through with smiles and urgent memos that now read like instructions for siphons. Bank trails that zigzagged into Tanya's recent splurges, jewelry, a German coupe with leather that still smelled like factory midnight, a deposit on a waterfront flat whose windows stared down at the rest of the city. By the time forensic accountants were done naming the rats, the story had crawled out of rumor and into record. And the city's appetite, always greedy for scandal, latched on with the same ferocity it used for football victories and fuel queues. Zuri's name leaked despite Kelechi's attempt to keep it folded away, her agency basking on morning shows while she hid behind curtains in a room that had never felt smaller, answering reporters through silence and making tea for Adayeze with hands that hadn't stopped trembling. The trial came fast because cameras make calendars hurry, and in a courtroom where air conditioners fought a losing battle with bodies, the defense tried to thread a needle through the eye of the absurd. Zuri as a tension-seeking fabulist, a maid who staged a spectacle to escape poverty, a punch thrown for fame. But evidence is rude to narratives. CCTV of the Capman's envelope, Maureen's interception at the photographer's surge, Tanya's 30-second corridor slip, the blue glue's shy smear across her palm, Say's testimony, stumbling, ashamed, cut deepest, the debts, the threats, the instruction whispered into his fear, make it smooth, no scent. Lab reports spoke chemistry's hard voice, cardiotoxic compound in the shards and the blue dot bottle, nowhere else. Bank logs braided Emeka to Sayi with transfers named like legitimate work but paid like bribes. When Emeka took the stand, his charm met the kind of cross-examination that turns varnish to scrape. And when Tanya tried to cry her way back into innocence, the judge's stare dried the performance midstream. Verdicts landed with the weight of things that cannot be spun. conspiracy, attempted murder, fraud. Sentences long enough to outlast gossip's half-life. Maureen, who had folded early and offered cooperation, took less, but still enough to learn how time tastes. In the city's glass towers, execs practiced a new posture, humility as risk management. And on the street, market women added Zuri's name to the soft litany of people who did the hard, right thing and forced rich problems into daylight. Kelechi refused the victory lap, preferring meetings with auditors and board committees to cameras. And one quiet afternoon, he called Zuri to a small room at the foundation, where a few trustees waited with coffee and a certificate printed on good paper that didn't need a red carpet. He thanked her without poetry, voice low. You paid a price to choose the sure way, and handed her a stipend that would carry her through school, plus a work badge with her name beside a title that didn't sound like apology. Community liaison, scholarships. They clapped the way you clap in places where the work must continue, and Kasim ruined the solemnity by insisting they inspect every bottle of sparkling fruit juice before popping them, earning the room's first easy laughter since the night of flashes. Later, Zuri walked home carrying groceries that made the plastic bags bite her fingers. Rice, tomatoes bright as small suns, a whole chicken, mangoes for Adayaze. And the landlord met her on the stairs without his usual thunder, offered a nod like a handshake he owed her, and said, "If the window sticks again, call me," as if kindness had been there the whole time, waiting for an excuse. Adayaze listened to the entire story, poison, punch, arrests, the judge's gavel, the job, with her hand wrapped around Zuri's like an anchor. And when Zuri finished, mother and daughter sat inside a silence that wasn't fear, but fullness. In the mornings after, Zuri began her rounds at schools where chalk dust hangs like weather, learning to read transcripts like maps and lives like essays that hadn't been graded yet, spotting the students whose brilliance hid behind exhaustion and bad buses and the kind of quiet that gets mistaken for smallness. Sometimes, late, she stood at the window and watched the city pulse, thinking of the blue dot that had been both danger and compass, and understood that the world does not change direction with speeches or statements, but with one person choosing to be seen, to act, and to pay the cost of certainty. And on those nights, when the cough was soft, and the new calendar's rent days were not circled in red, but crossed out with ease, she let herself believe that what began as violence had become a door she could hold open for someone else.
The rooftop garden felt like the opposite of a gala. No cameras, no chandeliers, just frangipani breathing into the dusk and Legos stretching outward like a galaxy that refused to sleep. And Zuri arrived with a folder of school visit notes under her arm, ink smudged from the day's work, heart lighter than she trusted. Benches circled low planners, Edison bulbs hummed a soft amber, and a table near the rail held sweating bottles of sparkling fruit juice that Kasim guarded with theatrical suspicion, checking seals in a pantomime that earned more laughter than the city had heard from this team in weeks. Kelechi stood at the ledge with 2 trustees and a handful of staff, program leads who wore sun from fieldwork, and accountants who had learned to smile again. And when he saw Zuri, he didn't wave her forward like a rescued story. He simply made space as if she'd always belonged inside the circle. She had spent the morning in Agege, where a physics teacher stretched wire into instruments to explain resonance, and a girl named Halima kept the Journal of Equations next to grocery lists, and the afternoon in Mushin, where a boy who fixed phones after school built a mock inverter from scraps and explained Ohm's law like a joke. Zuri had written their names, their shyness, their fire, and later when she had time to breathe, she would build a scholarship case that spoke their language without flattening their lives. For now, the city's wind lifted a curl of her hair and she let it, the first unguarded gesture in a body trained to hold itself small. Kasim cracked a bottle with a flourish, sniffed the cork like a sommelier by way of a security course, and poured the gentle fizz into glassware that caught the last light. Tanya's headlines had already moved from outrage to analysis to pop culture autopsies, and Mecca's pipeline had been cemented shut and swept for residue. Maureen's plea had become a wobbling cautionary tale in event planner group chats, and the board's governance reforms clicked into place with the finality of a safe door. Kelechi raised his glass, and the bruising along his jaw had traveled from purple to a memory-colored yellow, the kind of mark that lingers only to remind you what didn't happen. And his voice didn't reach for performance because he learned that calm made the best kind of microphone. To people who act when seconds matter, to seeing what others miss, and to the courage it takes to choose the sure way, the last frigid landing like a soft echo of the night that rewrote all their calendars. Zuri lifted her glass, palm steady, and thought not of cameras or headlines, but of Adieze sleeping without fever, of a rent notice that would not come, of Halima's neat handwriting and the boy in Mushin who cited possibility to wire. To second chances, she said, and felt the tremor of it resolve into something solid. They drank. No terror hid in the bubbles, only sweetness and a quiet fizz that tasted like permission. Afterward, music from a nearby rooftop grated with horn blasts from the street, and someone turned a small speaker low so the garden held rhythm but not distraction. People lingered in pockets, 2 program officers debating bus stipends versus data bundles, an accountant explaining in gentle detail how to build a spending plan that lived in real life and not just spreadsheets. Kasim giving an impromptu tutorial on situational awareness that somehow ended with everyone teasing him for the dramatic way he pronounces perimeter. Kelechi drifted to Zuri's side and asked about her notes, and she told him how principals sometimes apologized for cracked paint like it was a moral failure, how students folded their brilliance behind politeness until the right question unspooled it, how a mother pressed akara into Zuri's hands after a home visit and refused payment because gratitude wanted its own shape. He listened with that steady focus that had made the gala room exhale weeks ago, and when she finished, he didn't say good job like a boss assigning gold stars. He said, "What do you need?" and meant logistics, budget lines, time, trust. She named 3 small things and 1 big one: transport cars for interview days, a text line that didn't eat students' data, partnerships with clinics for eye checks, and pilot funds for an emergency bridge grant when a scholarship student's life hiccuped. Done to the first 2. Let's start scoping to the 3rd, and bring me a memo to the 4th. The language of a machine learning to move toward people instead of through them. Later, when the glasses were rinsed and the bubs hummed quieter and the trustees had gone, Kasim squared up playfully, chin tucked, hands raised. "Footwork, I can teach. That left hook, teach me." Zuri laughed, a real, rip-deep sound, and showed him the stance her life had built, the balance you learn from buses and buckets and trays through crowds. And as they danced a slow, ridiculous box step among planters, the city threw a warm breeze across their shoulders like a blessing. On the ride home, the driver threaded traffic like a patient riddle, and Zuri watched the neighborhoods unspooled, the glow of buka stoves, the juking of danfos, a woman's wrapper snapping as she shook dust from tomorrow, feeling the old rules loosening their grip 1 block at a time. Adieze was awake with a cup of tea she saved and a question in her eyes that wanted proof more than summary. So Zuri put the new ID badge in her mother's palm and let the lanyard pool there like a ribbon of sky, and Adieze breathed out a laugh that made the room larger. Much later, when the city's roar softened to a washable hum, Zuri stood at the window and touched the quiet with her fingertips, thinking of the blue dot that had once shouted danger and now read like a star on a map. Pay attention. Move first. Be sure. Somewhere, a girl ironed a uniform by candlelight, counting coins and prayers. And Zuri decided without declaration or drama that she would find that girl before the world did, put a scholarship between her and the fall, and one day bring her up to a rooftop garden to toast sweetness without fear.